Today we're going to talk about 3 different topics. The first one comes from a book, The Monk and the Riddle. Anybody ever read the book? Odd title, right? It has nothing to do with really what's in the book. Written by an entrepreneur, a tech entrepreneur. There's a bunch of key insights, but the one I want to talk about is the distinction between drive and passion. So, as described by Randy here, drive is what pushes you out of bed in the morning, makes you go and take your kids to school, right? Makes you go to work and get the work done. But it's an external force that pushes you along because you're expected to do something, or because you feel obligated to do something, or whatever reason is pushing you along. Right? That's drive. And he makes that distinction from passion, which is what wakes you up in the morning to energize you, that pulls you out of bed, that pulls you into work, that pulls you late at night working through problems because you have something important to do, right? Because it's important in your soul to get that done. Bottom line, as Randy describes this, is most people can't see the distinction of those two. That they get up and do their work, and they don't know whether they're being driven to it or whether it's a passion. That it takes some introspection to figure this out. And I already went through this, we'll skip past that. Okay. So what I've seen in discussions I've had with other people running other programs, especially in the tech world, is this difference between drive and passion in the entrepreneurs that come through Fledge versus the entrepreneurs that go to those other programs. Right? Quite a drastic difference. So we had a session of Fledge with another accelerator in the last time we ran through this, and we had our standard stand-up morning meeting. And so there were 7 fledglings and 5 or 6 of their teams. Not all their teams showed up. And we had our just standard status part, and then we were asking a bunch of questions at the end. And one of the questions I asked the group was, who here wants to sell their company in the next 3 or 4 or 5 years? And a bunch of hands went up. And we looked around the circle, and the only hands that were up were from the other accelerator, the tech accelerator. And it was unanimous on their side. They all were building their company to sell it. They all were looking for the exit. And none of the fledglings had raised their hands. Right? So, in this terminology, all the drive was coming from the tech side, and all the passion was coming from the impact side. Right? Clear distinction. And I have since talked to the head of that program, and we were talking about, well, what do we pick? What do we look for in teams when we pick them? And he was using a different term, and I don't remember the term he was using, but he was looking for entrepreneurs that would not just sit still and wait for business to come to them. He was looking for entrepreneurs that would get up, and if the phone wasn't ringing, they would pick up the phone and make calls. If something wasn't happening, if someone hadn't gotten back to them, they'd pick up the phone or send an email and make it happen. That they would get up out of the building physically and go wherever was needed. They wouldn't wait for the mentors to come to them, they would go out to see the mentors. So that's interesting. I said, well, what's that quality? Right? We're going to talk about qualities of entrepreneurs in a second here. Why do you pick those? He says, well, we only have a few weeks in the program, and if they sit around and they wait for something to happen, and it doesn't happen, then they've wasted the time in the program. They need to go out and get business. They need to go out and sell. I said, that's an interesting distinction. I see that, and I need that in fledglings too. But what I need from fledglings is passion for what they're doing, persistence in what they're doing, and resourcefulness. Right? And so we've already talked about passion. That second part is persistence. I say, what I look for first and foremost in the companies that come to this program is that no matter what, they have such passion for their problem that they're solving that they're never going to give up on it. And so if the first attempt at solving that problem, if 2 years later they still are trying to solve the problem, and all the solutions that they've come up with have not worked today. That they will try another solution. And we don't see this in the tech world. We see the drive that they want to go and make their solution, their company happen. But if it doesn't find product market fit, if it doesn't solve people's problems, if it doesn't provide revenues, well then they throw it away and they go find something else to do. They're missing that first piece. And I find that an interesting distinction between these two markets, right, between these two sectors.
I would just like to add my opinion
Yes.
that the emerging ICD for dev sector, mainly in frontier markets and or crossover, is probably the only exception to this. I'm seeing a huge sort of influx.
Yeah, there's
of
tech for good.
tech for social change.
Yeah, tech for social. But as long as it's attached to the social change market, I'm going to throw it into our bucket of the world.
Alright.
As long as there's it's basically the distinction, the dividing line is not tech or not tech. The dividing line is, do you have passion for the problem you're solving, or are you solving that problem because that's the best idea you had right now to solve your real passion, which is I want to be rich, right? There's a lot of people out there that do this thinking they're going to be rich. Most of them are deluded. Much better, we have a much happier life if your pursuit is to solve a problem, right? Someone else's problem, not your own. And the third one up here is resourcefulness. Where did I lost that piece? Yeah, which is why I couldn't find it. All right, so I kind of covered this, but persistence has many forms. Persistence, the one that I like best is the one that just says, I will just keep trying new things until something works, which is kind of related to resourceful. And it was a long time when I didn't understand what is so different about entrepreneurs than the rest of the folks.
Has there ever been a neurological study? I would love to make my way.
There is plenty of talk on the tech side about type A personalities and perfectionism and Asperger's and OCD and all that. I think that's again unique to
narcissistic personality.
Yeah, narcissists. Yeah, I think it's all unique to a corner of technology and high scale issues and whatnot. I don't think that's true of the bulk of entrepreneurs. What I did find written up in a few different places was this idea of resourcefulness, right? That entrepreneurs look out at the problem and they say, well, I need to solve this problem, and they don't care about what they're told is possible to solve the problem. That they look out there and go, well, what I just need an army, right? And then I can solve the problem. I need 10 people. I don't have 10 people. I have no money to pay for 10 people. Right? There's no way on earth that 10 people would rationally follow me. But nonetheless, I need 10 people, so I'm going to get them. Right? And the term I heard in one article was relentlessly resourceful.
My dad calls me that all the time.
Right. So you clearly fall in this category, and the subpart underneath that in the article, in terms of relentlessly resourceful, I'll just wait for the camera. I'll edit that part out. Yeah. So the key part of the article that talked about relentlessly resourceful was planning without regard to what resources you have. And that is a mind frame that I have never seen happen in anyone I've ever interacted with at a large company. Right? So whatever you want to call the people who are not entrepreneurial, the rest of the folks, the bulk of the people, when you go and interact and you talk about how you're going to get a project done, they look around the room and they look around the department and they see what resources they have to go do it. And when I or another entrepreneur sit in the same room working on the same problem, it doesn't matter who's in the room. It doesn't matter what you need. You just have to find a way to get it, right? So that's relentlessly resourceful.
Yeah, I talked to Nick Scott when he came down yesterday, and we talked about persistence. And one conclusion we came to, which I think ties into this, but it's a little bit different, is we tried to come up with the opposite of persistence, and we decided with fear. is. And so for an entrepreneur, it's not so much that the opposite of fear is courage. It's just persistence. It's not a lack of willingness to give up on something.
I say it's close. I think it's not totally true, but it's a close
Yeah,
answer.
it's about just add it to the ideas.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we got persistence, we got resourcefulness, we got some passion. What about luck? So how much of startup success is luck? Again, we can look back 60 years in startups and see which ones won and see which ones didn't. We can see today, again, tech companies, there's lots of data around it. For every tech company, there's 10 copycats, right? We're talking about Twitter right now because they're about to do an IPO. They're not the only company that came up with the idea of blogging really short sentences, right? Maybe they were the first, doesn't really matter. There were 100 of them, but they're the ones doing the IPO and the rest of them are gone, right? So why, right? How much of that was luck? And the best answer I've seen in all the articles I've read is a lot of that is luck, right? But it's not luck in the sense that good things happen out of the blue. It's luck in the sense that you've created the opportunity for good things to happen. Right? And so usually that's not the colloquial term luck, but it looks like it from the outside. So if you are in the market, then good things will happen. If you're still walking around with PowerPoint, this is another reason why the lean startup is correct. If you're going around talking to people doing the old-fashioned customer development model, right, you may have some luck turn around, but no one's going to come and call you and say, I really want to sign up to your product, right? I really want to buy your company, right? Because you're not out there in the market. If you're not being talked about by the press, fewer people have heard about you. So doing PR creates luck, right? If you're not out having conversations that turn into potential partnerships, which was the call I just got off.
What was that?
Off camera. You have to go out and make your own luck by talking to potential partners, right? And just being eyes up, looking out for lucky things to happen will create luck, right? And I didn't know where else to put this in the lecture, but it's something that it seems important to convey over to the entrepreneurs that you have to just keep at it in order for something good to happen.
When I first launched or shifted from nonprofit to entrepreneur world, I went to the Craigslist Foundation Nonprofit Boot Camp, which is the first impact conference that had happened 6 years ago. And the executive director stood up and was making a point about this. And he opened up the keynote not by saying luck, but he said how many people in the room have a passion that they're pursuing in the entrepreneurial and innovation world. Well, how many have noticed that the universe conspires in your favor once you commit toward working on your passion?
Yeah.
That really resonated, and like every hand in the room went up, and everyone started to tell stories of their luck.
Yeah, I should put that in here as well. So my first endeavor in helping an impactful company was Stockbox Grocers. So off camera. You can leave it on, I'll just cut it out. So I'm sitting in the back of the classroom at BGI. I'm watching presentations. Actually, I'm grading them at their putting comments down. And I'm talking to a bunch of different teams, and then the next month they said, well, just pick one. Just pick one you want to go help, and I picked Stockbox Grocers. It's 4 entrepreneurs, four MBAs. I had no idea whether it was for real or not, but it seemed like an interesting project. So I go and I start talking to them for that intensive. And then they graduated and launched the company. Did their prototype, and it was down to 2 people on the team. Just two people who run the company now. The other 2 decided not to pursue that. They get up and running, and they get the local news story on TV. And then they get written about by the local papers. And then they get written by the local papers. And then they get written about by the national press. They show up in Forbes and Fast Company. They get put on the White House blog. They get invited to the White House because Michelle Obama cares about food deserts. they get invited back to the White House a second time for the Jobs Act being signed. Only 3 companies in the whole country got invited. They were one of them. At one point, I did a search on Google, and there were 6,000 blog posts about stock box grocers, and they had spent 0 time on marketing. Didn't have a marketing person. Didn't spend a dime on PR, but they were solving a problem that people cared about, that resonated with readership, and so the press just embraced them and started writing about them left and right. They finally hired a marketing person, another BGR actually. But yeah, if you are working on a problem that people care about, unlike this standard capitalistic world, you suddenly have a following, right? And it's lovely. It's this new. It's truly a new mix between the nonprofit world and the for-profit world. You're right in between, and you can have fans, right? Despite the fact that for-profit. All right. So last topic of the day here is this old adage is true, right? So who you know is far more important than what you know. Right? So who do you know, and who do they know? And I don't have to teach this one to you, but it's about networking. Right?
That's why I'm smiling.
Yeah. So if you're in a job, if you're working in a bigger company, then networking is a nice to have thing. Right? You should be out doing it, but it's not the be all end all. It may open up other opportunities to leave that job and go get another job somewhere else. But if you're in a startup, then networking is something you have to do. Right? And it's not clear. A lot of people, right, are first-time entrepreneurs, and they don't realize this. And so by networking, you have conversations that lead to new team members, it leads to mentorship, it leads to partnership opportunities, right? You just have to be out there, is the other way to say it. You have to be talking to lots and lots of people. And if you've not done this before, it's not that hard. It just takes a lot of work because it doesn't happen by itself. Right? The phone doesn't, unless you're being pursued by other networkers, they don't call you. You have to go out and get them. And at the scale you need to do it, you need to go out and get them. So this is, where I'm telling people to start is meetup.com. It's kind of created for that. I get a meetup email, and it shows me there's like 3 or 4 events per day in the city of Seattle for meeting entrepreneurs.
Just to add something funky related to that, the founder still makes a commitment, because I've heard him speak at our Start Weekend thing, to attend random meetups in every city he goes to. And it doesn't matter what it is, just to make sure his product works and he's engaging with real people offline, which is the whole purpose.
And it's working, right? And so Meetup is a website where anyone can create an event, and people do, and people meet up, right? Literally. LinkedIn, I find, is an incredibly powerful tool for networking. I went from, despite being an entrepreneur, I didn't do enough of this before. I went from maybe 500 connections 3 years ago to 3,000 connections. And the interesting part about LinkedIn, right, flaunting the rules, because the rules are you're supposed to know the person before you connect to them. So know is kind of a weak definition, right? So if I've emailed them, I know them. And with a large network of 1,000 connections on LinkedIn, you now have access to their connections and their connections. So when you're looking to go and sell into some company, you can sit on LinkedIn and do a search. And if they're 2 degrees from you, you can reach out to them. If they're 3 degrees from you, you have to pay to reach out to them. Right? And that payment mechanism doesn't actually work. It's an email within LinkedIn, and people don't answer those. So if you're within 2 degrees, you're basically connected to them. So the bigger your own single degree network, the bigger your access to all the workers in the country and the world. Right? So use LinkedIn. Link to as many people as you meet. Anytime you meet anybody, take the effort, go online, search for them, find the right Bob Jones, and click connect. Write a little note. Hey, we just met yesterday. And usually they'll link back. Right? It's just expected right now. One of the assumptions in the world is if you have a job, you're a professional, you're on LinkedIn. And it's not true in every industry, but in the white collar industry we're sitting in here, it's true. Right? Third one is conferences and trade shows. Oh, sorry, I actually have details on this. Fourth is email, and the fifth one is to write. Let me go through this again. So, on terms of meetup.com, there's nice simple ones to start with, like the open coffee events. So there's a bunch of coffee events in the morning. In this city, there's lean startup events on there, and then there's a ton of events that happen in places like this that are co-working. On LinkedIn, in addition to your connections, whatever company you're running, you should create a company page. That way it shows up better. It looks, again, it makes it look like you're funded, which is one of the rules I had from a few weeks ago. You don't have followers on that page that matter. So unlike Facebook or Twitter, you're not advertising how big you are. You're just either there on LinkedIn or you're not. And worry about your own profile as well, right? You're basically putting a public resume out there. So spend some time and make it look good, and that includes, links on the bottom for places you've been written about. If you've written anything, there's a place to put your publications. There's now endorsements on certain topics, so be careful about which ones you pick, because you don't want to put up there that you're really good at whatever and have 3 people say you're really good at it. Right? 3 isn't a very good number. In my case, the top ones are all maxed out. It dribbles off, but for some reason the system keeps, people keep referring me to things that I don't really do. And so I'm not adding those in. I've been getting a lot of them that say consulting. I don't know why. I'm generally not a consultant. I don't want it to show that 7 people said I'm a good consultant. Right? Either do it or don't do it. So prune it out. And you can get those written references on there as well, which I haven't done. Depends on where you are in your world and what you need them for. But I think there's 1 or 2 on there for me that were unasked for. Second one is there's groups on LinkedIn. And this is one I've been playing around with more on the marketing side than the networking side. But you're allowed to be a member of 50 groups. And what it's useful for is to be seen. So it's useful to find an interesting article and post it to 10 or 20 or 30 groups, whatever's relevant to that article, even if you didn't write it, because it puts your name out there in front of thousands of people that you don't know. And some of them will write back, and some of them will just hit the like button, and some of them will reach out and link to you on LinkedIn. Right now you know them because they read your post on some piece. Right? Being known as an expert in the field is useful for your business and useful for your life. And lastly, just LinkedIn is useful to be as a search engine for anyone you're looking for. So as you're trying to grow your team, as you're trying to find customers, again, it's a really useful tool, and it gets more useful the more people you're connected to. There's lots of conferences and trade shows for whatever industry you're in. I always advocate that you go to the conference before you ever think about having a booth or showing off at a conference. That's usually less valuable than actually just showing up. And what I've seen many people do wrong is most people are introverts, and they revert to being an introvert while they're at the conference, and they lose out on the opportunity to talk to all the people who are there. And so I am an introvert. But I will break out my stack of cards and I will just start chatting with whoever's sitting at the table. Right? And sometimes it's a quick conversation because we have nothing in common, and sometimes there's serendipity, sometimes I'm just making luck. And oh my God, I had no idea this person existed, and they're going to connect me to 5 other people. And I just did that by sitting down and saying hi. Oh, and lastly on here, if you haven't done this, for those of you who haven't been to too many conferences, plan on being up late, because most of what happens after the hours of the conference at the parties. There are always parties. And even if you don't have an invite to the parties before you got to the event, while you're sitting down at the table, you can ask, oh, what are you doing tonight? Which parties are you going to tonight? And you can almost always get invited into the parties. You just have to know where they are. On the networking side, email is clearly the path to communicate. be the most professional person you know of in terms of always following up. You have a phone conversation, send the thank you email afterwards. Right? Even if you think you are of a superior standing to the person you just had the phone conversation with, doesn't matter. Have a thank you email that got sent out. If you just met someone at a trade show or whatnot, you could always ask to meet. I get a lot of incoming email asking to talk to me, and I will try and do these things face to face when possible. When you're out actively trying to network, the key part is that when you finally have that call or that face-to-face meeting, your ask at the end is to ask for more people. So when I first started Fledge, it was a new industry to me, and I wanted to meet everybody that was related to this industry. And so I started by having 15 or 20 meetings a week in coffee shops. I had 3 or 4 or 5 a day in coffee shops. There's a lot of coffee shops here in Seattle. I would make the rounds. And every time I'd have a conversation with one of these people, I'd say, well, tell me who are 2 or 3 other people who might be interested in Fledge. And, not as investors, not as participants, just interested. And usually I would get one name I already knew, because it's a small town. And so I'd say, that's nice. I already met that person last week, or they're on my calendar. More names. And I wouldn't stop that until they gave me at least 2 or 3 names, because not everybody's going to respond. And so if you can get one actionable name for every networking event, every networking meeting, then you're continuing to network. Right? You don't have to go and try and dig up a new name. They're giving them to you. And if you get 2, that's even better. So now every meeting gets 2, and you have more and more meetings. To the point, if you do this enough, you have to meter it out, because you don't have enough time to meet everyone in every coffee shop. And kind of a mix of networking and marketing is I quickly made a newsletter for Fledge. And all right, the nicest thing you could possibly do to everyone is only add them to the newsletter when you ask them, can I add you to the newsletter? But there's an unsubscribe button on the bottom, so I don't subscribe to that. So if I meet someone, they go on my newsletter. Right? And it's a little pushy, and I'm sending a little bit more spam than I think is prudent. But my goal is that every time I send a newsletter, which is every 10 days to 2 weeks in general, that I've added more names than unsubscribe. And so there's always unsubscribes. If there aren't, then I'm not adding enough names. Right? Kind of the other flip side of that. And I've grown this newsletter from a few hundred people to over 2,000 in a year and a half. Right? And most of them have not unsubscribed. Most of them don't open the newsletter. Right? It doesn't really cost them anything, because they're not opening it anyway. But a very large number of people are now reading this. And because of that, I get a whole lot of incoming email. And a whole lot. And it is part marketing and part networking. Right? I'm a people-based business, so it's kind of a networking-based marketing path. Next one is write. You are expected to have a blog on your corporate website. It's just an expectation. And because you have a blog, you have to have a post at least once a month. It's going to look like your company's out of business if you haven't updated it. Right? More than once a month is better. Once a day is overkill, because no one's going to read it. Right? It needs to be there. It has to have some entries in it that aren't dated. If you want to be actually read, then you write for other people's blogs. And that's news blogs and guest posts on blogs that have readership. And lots of publications want content, and you're welcome, and you should be off writing for them too. So in our space, write for Triple Pundit, write for Next Billion, write for Stanford Review. You're going to get rejected a lot from those, but it doesn't matter, because you can always post it on your own blog. Think of networking as branding. So it's kind of interesting. We talked about sales in terms of selling your product to customers. We talked about sales in terms of raising money is selling your company. And networking is really just sales where it's you. You're the product. So if you're the product, then what does the customer on the other end of the coffee shop table want out of that meeting, right? What's in it for them? Give them what they want, right? And what's the brand that they're attached to? What does your brand mean? You can actually go all the way down and do the core essence of yourself. You can do there's actually a book called Business Model U that uses the business model canvas around you, where you're the product. Especially in a business that is wrapped around the knowledge of one person or two people. It's really important to make a distinction. Here's what the business does, but here's the expert. Here's why you want to work with that expert. And what's that expert's brand? What's wrapped around that persona of that person? Okay. There's an old movie. I don't know how many people have seen Force 10 from Navarone. Old movie from the 70s, Harrison Ford, before he was famous. It's a World War II film. It comes back in my head all the time because I'll ruin it for you. The climax of the film, they need to go blow up a dam. Because they actually need to knock down a bridge, and the only way to knock down the bridge is to knock down the dam to have the water knock down the bridge. They don't have enough explosives. So they make it all the way through enemy lines and whatnot, and they get into this dam, and they got their backpack full of explosives, and they set it up, and they look at the clock, and oh my God, they're out of time. And they say, all right, well, we're just going to kill ourselves. We're just going to set the timer for 20 seconds, and this dam's going to blow up, and we're going to die from all the water. Set it up, explosion happens, lots of dust, but the dam is still standing. And they realize, at this point, it didn't work. Right? Oh my God, I did all this work, we've been through this hour and a half of film, we're sitting here in the depths of the dam and it didn't work. And the next thing they notice is that small cracks start forming in the walls and little bits of water start dribbling in. And then the cracks get bigger and the water starts spraying, and then they realize, oh my God, the dam's gonna burst, I gotta get out of here. And they run up out of the dam. And 5 minutes later, the whole dam bursts open, right? And they save the day. Right? That comes back in my head because this effort of networking and building companies is like blowing up a dam. All you have in your toolkit, the equivalent to this, is one cherry bomb, right? And if you put the cherry bomb in the right place and it blows up and you wait long enough, it will work, right? Or one little rock pick. If you just keep picking at the wall, eventually you'll make it through to the water, and the water will do the rest of the work, right? We used to talk, there's two other analogies we used at previous companies. One is turning over rocks, right? If you simply go around and you turn over all the rocks, sometimes you'll find gold underneath some of them. You just have to turn over a lot of rocks. And the other one, my former CEO used to talk about was kissing frogs, right? You gotta kiss a lot of frogs to find the prince, the princess. Which means, not all those networking meetings, not all those coffee meetings will be productive. They won't all lead somewhere. They won't all have, they won't all have names at the end. Some of them will be total duds. All right, same thing in business. Not every potential partnership conversation will lead to a partnership. 99% of them won't. Right? Just like 99% of or 90-something% of the sales calls won't result in selling anything. But you have patience and persistence and keep at it, and it will finally blow up the dam or turn into a prince or you'll find gold, whatever your analogy is. And lastly, when out networking, you got to keep track. So the far high-end solution of networking to do this would, of course, be Salesforce.com. To use Salesforce for your own personal networking. Seems a little bit overkill, or at least expensive. So that's a copy, that's a screenshot of my tool that I use, which is a spreadsheet. And on the spreadsheet, everyone's categorized, it's the colorful side, and I stopped using colors because that got out of hand. But there's a code on there that tells me where in the world they're from, kind of what market are they from, how are they important to my networking effort, who they are, their email address, what company they work for now. The interesting part is there's a date field. That's the date that I've last talked to them, right? So that I can look back and say, oh my God, I haven't talked to this person in 9 months. And it's sitting there right there on that document. as opposed to me trying to find them in email or trying to find them on my calendar. And then there's some notes, because there's no way on earth I can remember 3,000 conversations. Right? So some little bits of notes that said what we talked about, what the follow-ups were, how I got to this person. A lot of these notes say introduced via and someone else's name, or they got to me through the contact list, or there was an incoming LinkedIn, or I met them at a certain conference. Right? Just a little tidbit to get it through. And then if you look at the bottom, you actually see, if you squint hard enough, there's a bunch of tabs, because I have one page that is everybody that I've met in networking for Fledge. There's one tab that's just the investors of those, because I'm always looking for investors, right, for Fledge and the Fledge funds. And then the other tabs are things like press, or certain partnerships, or other subsets that are really important. And so I've made copies, and those subtabs look like this tab. Right? They're in fact just copies of the lines that are relevant. Right? And no, I haven't made this fancy enough that the dates are all linked together or anything like that. You can go hot block. But this for me now has 3,000 or 4,000 entries. And very lastly, just like any other lean startup network, it's a process, and you have to just keep trying new things. So new tools show up, new social networks show up. Just try them, right? Take a time, you get someone else's newsletter, and it says, hey, wow, here's a new contact solution, here's a new mentorship platform, right? Sign up, see what happens. Worst case is, nothing happens. Next worst case is you get one connection. As long as it doesn't take you an hour to set up the profile. Okay. Any questions?